Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started in this room. Welcome to our last session, What Do Our Students Say? We have an exciting presentation this afternoon, 2 parts. In our first part, Frank Hayes, the lecturer in the School of Accounting and Finance, will be joined by 3 students, Jacqueline Sue, Anna Puri, and Dominic to share their experience working on the Student Venture Fund. After their presentation, we will hear about the Engineering iCapstone program from Oscar Nespoli, continuing lecturer in the Department of Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering, and Ada Hurst, continuing lecturer in Management Sciences, along with Thomas Willert, Plastcoat, a division of Magna. Please join me in welcoming our first presenters, Frank, Jacqueline, Anna, and Dominic to the stage.
In the School of Accounting and Finance. I want to tell you a bit about the Waterloo Student Venture Fund today, which we started 2 years ago. It's one of a series of experiential course initiatives that we're undertaking in the School of Accounting and Finance. And this one's combined, it's cross-disciplinary because we've combined forces with the MBET program in the Conrad School. So you could think of the Student Venture Fund as a sort of a 3-legged stool. And when we planned the fund, we realized we needed 3 key inputs. We needed money. You can't run a venture fund without money. We needed deal flow, and we needed talent. Well, we knew we had talent. You're going to see some of them in a couple of minutes. One of my associates, Professor Ranjini Jha, was able to secure $500,000 from an anonymous donor, and we're working our way towards getting it up to $2 million. So we got the money. And then the deal flow problem we solved by allying ourselves with local and Toronto angel investor groups. So they're generally wealthy people that invest in very early stage companies, and one venture capital fund out of Mars in Toronto called the Mars Investment Accelerator Fund. I probably don't need this slide at the University of Waterloo, but some of the people ask, well, why are you doing this at the University of Waterloo? Well, to us, it's the most obvious place on earth to start a venture fund because of the things that you know. That you may not know, PitchBook ranked us as the highest ranked Canadian university for the number of VC-backed entrepreneurs. So we're ranked number 20 in the world. We have a good School of Accounting and Finance. We wanted our students to be exposed to non-accounting and finance disciplines, so we teamed up with MBET. And we're a seed fund, as our student design logo suggests, and you'll meet the logo designer in a moment. What are we trying to do from a teaching perspective? We're trying to teach students, or probably more properly, enable them to learn early stage investment process from both sides of the table. A few of our students will become venture capitalists. They'll be the funders. But many more of our students will go on and become, say, chief financial officers in tech companies. We wanted to train them up in the rules of engagement in this type of funding business. We really wanted to enable students to see beyond the numbers and be comfortable making decisions in the face of great uncertainty. There's no more uncertain investments in the world than the ones that we're looking at in the Student Venture Fund. And that's a big contrast from traditional business school learning in accounting and finance, where things are relatively certain, or at least you can calculate them. Student learning is our primary goal, but financial return is important. We're not in the business to lose our money. We want to make money. So for those of you that are interested, our financial return goal is 20% internal rate of return over a 7-year time trajectory. The other important thing you're going to see from the students' experience is we wanted them to learn how entrepreneurs and angel investors think. So in their dealings in the fund, they're working with these people who are generally very successful multimillionaire entrepreneurs. And we essentially bought a seat at the table and were able to interact with them. What are the student learning outcomes? Well, the students in this fund make decisions at a much higher level than they ever would in a co-op program or at an entry-level job. In my estimation, we're probably advancing the decisions that they're making by 5 to 7 years. It'll be 5 years before they get back to the same decision level, but hopefully you'll all retain your knowledge by then. And the most important thing for us in a kind of a less risk-averse environment, say accounting and finance, we're trying to teach students how to take risks in the face of great uncertainty. So I want to turn it over to our three panelists, Jacqueline, Anu, and Dominic.
Thank you so much, Frank, for introducing us. So just a brief introduction. My name is Jacqueline. We're all actually fourth-year students in our last undergrad term, and we're all in the accounting and finance program.
Yep. You want to talk about
Sure. One thing you probably can see over there, I was on the fund on fall 2017, which is, fun fact, when we started the fund. So I'll be talking about interesting facts about us actually being a startup ourselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Anu. I'm also a 4B student in the Accounting and Financial Management program. I'm actually on the fund currently as well, and I was on it for the second term I was running, so winter 2018. So if you, I'll be able to answer any questions related to how we've progressed over the last year, I would say.
Hi everybody, my name is Dominic. I'm also in my 4B term in AFM. So I was on the fund in winter 2018, so January to April 2018, and I'm helping out with the fund as a student advisor at the moment.
Awesome, so let's begin. Okay, so to summarize our learning experience, it can actually be summarized in a quote that I often hear, which is, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, but involve me and I'll learn. And I'll leave it up to you to decide which one the venture fund falls in. But anyway, in all seriousness, I remember joining the fund in fall 2017 and us being involved right away and in ways that you may not expect. For instance, Frank and our other professors he mentioned sat us down and said, look, we have no website, we have no brand, we have no code of conduct, but this is where we're going to involve the students to really set the foundation for our venture fund. And essentially that's where it began in fall 2017, and not even just looking at companies yet, but defining who we are as a startup ourselves. So like Frank mentioned earlier, one fun fact is the logo you see down there was something the students developed back in fall 2017. And before it looked like that, it used to be a light bulb, it used to be a tree, we had green, we had orange, and finally, after a couple months, we finally decided on the logo over there. What was also very valuable is that the professors sat down with us and asked us for our input on how we should run the fund in the future, as well as interviewing future people onto the fund, such as Anu and Dominic. Secondly, another valuable lesson we learned was that it's not just about numbers. And being accounting and finance students, that feels like a moral sin. Like we learn that you need to make decisions based off numbers, that's something that you weight, but going to the venture fund, you learn that it's also important to look at the people who are running these organizations, because essentially you're investing into the people and the companies that they're running. So one valuable skill that I've definitely learned was the ability to talk to C-suite executives and execute that level of professionalism. And oftentimes they're very, very shocked to find out that you're a student. Which leads me to my next point of how does this really help accelerate or expand upon my career? So next October, I'll be returning to Deloitte as a tax analyst. I know, it sounds really interesting, but what's really cool about specifically in the group I'm in, is we're very involved with entrepreneurship and technology. Specifically, my group is involved in what's called Deloitte's Fast 50 program, where we interview thousands of companies across Canada to determine the top 50 fastest growing companies. And during my past co-op term, I was pulled into a lot of these interviews, and my managers actually told me that they were shocked to find out that I was just a co-op student, and same with the CEOs and CFOs that I was interviewing. And that just really shows a testament of what we've learned in the venture fund and the level of professionalism we've developed. On top of that, there were a lot of technical skills that we learned in terms of the technology behind these companies, and I'll leave it to Anu to talk about the technical skills that we've developed.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So really, a lot of what's on these slides right now is the bread and butter of what we do every day. At the end of the day, we're a venture fund, and what we're trying to do is learn about different businesses, go out, find out what the businesses entail, and hopefully invest in them. And the way we've figured out and really honed this process is we've partnered up with angel networks, so angel investors who are worth millions and millions of dollars. I was actually at an event last night. Dominic was there with me as well. Tables just like these, we're sitting with people who've got millions and millions of dollars. We don't have the same amount, obviously, but we have the ability to make an impact and ask questions directly and compete and be at the same level with these people. So really, that's been a very tangible element of learning for me personally, is being able to go in, not knowing anything about a company whatsoever, walking into Frank's office one day and saying, "Oh, what are we doing?" and reading basically a 10-page memo, being able to extract information from there, ask founders, what is it that, here are some concerns that I may have, can you help me address these concerns? And being able to go back and talk about this with a very knowledgeable background and teach people in class as well. So that's been very valuable. And I think it's very transferable as well. When you look at it, when you're in the workplace, you have to be able to adapt very quickly, be thrown a lot of information, and be able to sift through that information. And that's what we do on the daily, really, is being able to go in, not knowing anything about an industry, figuring out what are the challenges of this industry. Is this industry going to face disruption, or is it going to be disrupted completely? And from that information, we're working with other students in the School of Accounting and Finance, but luckily we've also had the opportunity to work with students in the MBAT program. And really I think that's the game changer for us, is when we connect with other faculties and leverage the resources available from the engineering department or from the MBATs or from science, physics, et cetera. We're able to really piggyback on their knowledge and be able to expand our own technical skills from that front. So that's been a really important part of everything we do at the fund. And also we're looking at trying to expand our own internal repository of information. So we do these things called tech deep dives. And what that is we come up with topics of different industries and different technologies that are really up and coming. So in my winter 2018 term, I guess, we were looking at augmented reality and how that's shaping the future and what applications are available, how does the technology work, look at, Pokemon Go and the phenomenon that came out of there and how it's really expanded. So being able to take those informations and that information and being able to just convey it to other people, ask questions about it so we can reinforce our learning a lot more, and be able to go back to it when we're looking at companies from that same experience, right? You want to be able to build this data so when you're looking at an organization that's using it, we're able to really quickly go back and refresh ourselves whenever we need to. But once you go through and ask the questions and learn about all the information associated with it, you also have to do something with it. And for me personally, I think all the strategy that I've learned up until now is very applicable to my role coming in. I'm excited to say I'll be going to Deloitte for strategy and operations consulting next fall. And I'm extremely excited because I know that a lot of the interactions of what Jacqueline talked about with meeting founders and being able to understand businesses is going to apply directly there. And once you're able to meet the people, once you're able to extract the information, then you actually have to do something with it and invest. And I think that's where Dominic is going to lead us through the last half.
Thanks, Anoop. So yeah, one of the things that we really work on is expanding our way of thinking. So one of the ways that we kind of leverage this skill is through presenting to our investment committees. So we have people like Tim Jackson, Carol Lehman, Dave Caputo, all very renowned entrepreneurs and investors in the KW and Toronto region. So whenever we prepare for these investment committee presentations, it's very similar to what a real VC analyst or associate would do. So currently I'm also working at Ripple Ventures, a new early stage venture fund based out of Toronto. And every week we have to be able to pitch a company or a couple companies to the managing partners or the general partners. And you have to think through all these questions and scenarios that the companies need to go through and some of the concerns that the partners would have before you actually make a recommendation. So the skill that you develop in the Student Venture Fund is this ability to think of all the possible questions and concerns that the partners, aka the investment committee, would have in order to make an investment recommendation or to not invest. So that's one key skill that we develop here. Another one is being able to look into the future. So as Jacqueline pre-alluded to, we as accountants and finance professionals, we love to look at historical financials. We have 5 to 10 years of past performance that we can look into, but with these startups that we analyze, there is no such thing. Maybe they have the past 3-4 months of performance, but you can't really figure out the future projections based on top of that. So one of the things we work on at the Student Venture Fund is being able to look 3 to 5 years into the future without historical information. And being able to switch our way of thinking and develop a futuristic point of view instead of just looking in the past is a very important skill in the industry. Another huge thing in the Student Venture Fund is mentorship. So one of the things that I didn't have a couple of years ago when I tried to get into the industry was a network of venture capitalists in SAF or even in Waterloo in general. And one of the things that I think SVF is helping build is this network of entrepreneurs and investors in the tech scene to be able to foster a new kind of growth and entrance potential for UW students, because these jobs are extremely hard to find. There's not that many of them. People don't know how to get in. So being able to develop these core skills that a lot of other students in other universities don't get the chance to really puts Waterloo at the top of the list when it comes to students trying to actually get into the industry, because there's so much exposure with the Student Venture Fund. So Anu also talked about the tech deep dive. So the Student Venture Fund is also working on publishing a couple of these technology deep dives into public blog posting. And one of the things that I found when I was looking for a job in venture capital was that you need a portfolio of work or a kind of a shown of keen interest in technology and startups. So how you present this is actually just writing your own blog posts. So when I was going through my job search, I was also trying to put out a bunch of blog posts, a bunch of industry outlook updates. And I think what the Student Venture Fund now is doing is preparing students extremely well for looking for a job in the tech scene. So at Ripple Ventures, I'm an associate, and I think all of the things that we've touched upon, especially where Anu has talked about in the diligence phase, talking to founders, even Jacqueline making the logo and kind of developing a website, just being very entrepreneurial and being able to work with not a lot of resources and being able to be flexible as well as think very broadly but realistically is a very hard learned skill. And I think the Student Venture Fund brings a lot to the table for students and also faculty and also to a lot of entrepreneurs to be able to learn from each other. And it's great to be able to pay it back to the community that we're building, especially from the engineering side. There's so much tech coming out of there. So it's great that we have an opportunity to be able to help fund some of these companies as well out of the KW region. So yeah, thank you so much. That's the rest of our presentation. We'll open it up to Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much, Frank and Jackie and Anna and Dominic. We'll actually do a Q&A from both parties after our second presentation. Thank you. That sounds like a very exciting opportunity, so thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. Please join me now in welcoming to the stage Oscar, Ada, and Thomas to speak about their experiences.
Hi everyone, thanks very much for sticking around. This is a great symposium. I hope we do it next year. What I'd like to talk about is some programming that we've started. It's called iCapstone. It's a great symposium. We want to talk about it again. I wish I could describe this programming as a three-legged stool, like Frank suggested, but it's actually only a one-legged stool because we don't have $500,000 and we don't have deal flow. But what we do have are outstanding students, and you're going to hear from one today. All right, iCapstone, so that's what we want to talk about. So iCapstone, I stands for Integrated, Interdisciplinary, and International Capstone Design. First of all, I'd like to thank our contributors, without which we wouldn't be here today, including Jim Russell, Director of Data Innovation Lab. Rocco Fondacaro was the internal executive sponsor for the program. Judine Preddy, of course, who funds us. Phil Bazaire, who was at the very nascent stages of the program, and Christina Hassan, who's the CEO and founder of Full Soul Canada, a sponsor. So what we want to talk about is world-leading creative problem solving. Technicians solve well-defined problems Technologists solve broadly defined problems, and graduates solve complex open-ended problems. World-leading graduates demonstrate confidence and competence in engaging with messy, indeterminate situations. Donald shown that the problems of real-world practice are not well defined. They tend not to present themselves to practitioners as problems at all, but as messy, indeterminate situations. So he challenges us. He says, do you want to stay on the high ground of technical rationality to solve unimportant problems according to prevailing standards of rigor? And do you want to descend into the so-called swamp of important problems and non-rigorous inquiry? Addressing these indeterminate zones of practice requires so-called uncoded knowledge. And this is difficult to teach because it's embedded in practice. Highly coded knowledge is knowledge that's provided by us in the modern day university. Technical knowledge, scientific knowledge. It's this so-called third person knowledge where, for example, Isaac Newton doesn't have to be around for us to learn about F equals ma. Uncoded knowledge is knowledge gained by expert practitioners. And this kind of knowledge is a result of enskillment that comes from being actively engaged in a practice environment. Now, I just want to stop there to say we have this really important competitive advantage here. It's called co-op. It's our DNA. Someone once told me, if you really want to understand something, you go back to its genesis. If you go back to our genesis, that's what co-op can give us. We really need to take advantage of it. And this is the motivation for this programming. This key skill of engaging with the practice environment, or what Schoen terms reflective practice, is best exemplified in the discipline of design and engineering. So Ada and I asked ourselves these following overarching research questions. To what extent can need finding and problem formulation be taught, learned, and assessed during the co-op work terms? And how can clinical instruction through the application of Schoen's theory of reflective practice facilitate this? You're not going to hear the answers to those questions today because we haven't figured it out yet, but we're well on our way. So I approached BATA Innovation Lab to hire an interdisciplinary team of co-op students and place them in an opportunity-rich context. And when I approached Jim, I said, you're not allowed to give them a project. I just want you to drop them in there. And at the same time, they wanted to introduce some disruptive and innovative thinking back into the organization. The management team in Columbia was looking for these innovative approaches, and they're willing to make investments. And so we hired these students, and they acted as consultants, and they were charged with need finding and then proposing these significant problems to solve. Ada and I conducted learning sessions at the end of each week during their lunch break. They were in Manizales, Colombia, in the coffee growing regions, and we were in Waterloo. The learning was facilitated both with structured and unstructured approaches, so there were very few lectures, mostly opportunistic teaching as problems unfolded, something that's called just-in-time learning. Students were asked at the end of each week to discuss and reflect on the problem that they were engaging with, and very specifically and intentionally, what unfolded about their problem that was expected, and what unfolded about the problem that was unexpected or surprising. And now I think I'm going to hand it over to Thomas.
So there was 5 main points of student feedback that were highlighted throughout their research about what we were doing in the term. And the most important one that we faced as students and as consultants at the company was the lack of a proper project definition. So we came into the company, as Oscar said, dropped right in, We were not allowed to have a project. They tried to give us projects, we refused. And we went out every day. We went to a different area of the company through finance, through quality, through design, through manufacturing. For about 2 weeks, we did this. And then over the course of the term, we kept searching for needs. There is a need to fix the way the person moves this simple little angle. Little things, big things, all in the hopes of finding projects. Over the course of the term, we found about 250 to 300 different potential projects, just based off of simple observations. So that was the one real important factor that we learned here. Rather than as a normal co-op student, here's a list of projects, we want you to do this. This taught us to be self-sufficient. What went along with this was a lack of supervision. So this has its advantages and disadvantages. Key one being the fact that as management had a list of projects that they wanted us to do, and we wanted to do other projects, there was a little bit resistance. We sorted this out and eventually matched our scope of projects with some that they were interested in and focused on those as on an individual basis. So again, as this was part of the iCapstone project, the one thing we ran into was the fact that we didn't actually implement our project. We wanted to work this project through to its capstone stage. So the first 4 months are not about implementation, they're simply project definition. Unfortunately, we didn't end up continuing this project throughout capstone. We actually ended up working on a different project that we discovered using these methods in a more relaxed environment. We were sitting for dinner one day and did a needs analysis based off of a restaurant we were sitting at and ended up using that as our capstone. So we didn't actually implement our project there, but we did provide transition documents which were given to the company to move forwards with. So as I said before, there was some conflicting things that happened. So the most important feature about this program that I think really needs to be said here is the fact that there was teaching during the co-op term. WAT PD is fantastic, but honestly, you sit there, you click a few buttons, you write a couple sentences, and you get through it. It's credit, no credit. When you're engaged with the professor who's interested in the work you're doing at a company, and the company starts gaining interest as well, you've got a lot of different fronts coming together to create excitement, create interest in the project that you're actually working on. We dug really deep. We had Oscar there to provide support for us, and we had the company also providing reflection back. So all of this together was really important to us. So yeah, that's the practical, useful content. Oh, okay, yeah, so there's some disadvantages we had were the fact that since we were in Skype and we were in a third world country, the audio-video connection wasn't always that great. Pass on to Anna here.
So as Thomas was describing, earlier stages of assessing this program actually were fundamentally about, okay, the perceptions of the students of the program. So that's why we have met their feedback first through individual surveys, so each of the 3 students individual, and then through focus group. So we were able to kind of capture exactly how they felt about the entire program, whether all the different key areas like Magnus condition and Magna project and so on. This more intense aspect of researching the program and understanding its effectiveness has required sort of different methodology. And so we've had the fortune of recently collaborating with Dr. John Jarrow, who's a world-renowned expert in design research. And so we're actually he's teaching us, we are very students in it, he's teaching us on how to systematically design research design processes stage, what we're doing is we're taking a high-level analysis. So as a result of this program, what we have as an artifact is basically these learning session transcripts. There's 12 or 14, I forget how many of them. They're about an hour each, so there's a lot of content. And it's very rich natural language data, which is very hard to analyze. And so we've had to apply quite a few tools to clean that data, extract meaningful information, very rudimentary natural language processing and topic extraction. And so the questions that we have really on the data is basically, what are these design review conversations about? What happened in these learning sessions? Oscar and I were both in those sessions, but we are participants. Now we're kind of looking at it as researchers or third party. And so what were the discussions about? How do those topics change week to week? Were the tutors and the students, the tutors being myself and Oscar, and the students being the 3 students, were they talking about different things, and how do those differences change from week to week? And so through these natural language processing methods, one thing, for example, that we're looking at is, what are the main topics that are being discussed? And you'll see that in the first 2 columns. One says low-level manufacturing. The students were working in a shoe manufacturing environment, and words like shoe, last, uppers, cement, sole, heel, cart. These are words that I learned about the terms. I didn't know what lasts and socks were in that context. But anyway, these are the words that were the most spoken. The verbs and nouns involving those words were the most spoken. But the second most spoken words or terms arise from an abstraction of design, meaning words like function, requirement, specification, constraint, system, subsystem, structure. And as we expected, and we're glad to confirm it, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but basically, when it came to students, they were much more talking about concrete design issues related to the thing that they were actually designing. A cart to transport these shoes in the cement line, for example. Whereas the tutors, they were talking more at a much more abstract level, talking about these abstractions of design. And there's a bunch of other topics, I guess, that we've also extracted. To dive deeper, looking at sort of week by week, by quantitatively measuring the topics in each week, we can actually capture very well what's happened. So, for example, looking at the topic of low-level manufacturing, like I said, those words related to those terms there, you can see that week by week, yes, as we expected, it was the students that they were talking most about these things. And then you'll notice that there's a huge spike, or a pretty big spike in week 14. And you wonder, well, why are we all of a sudden talking so much about this thing? Well, that is the week, which was the week when we opened Skype and the students are completely deflated. I remember that very well. And they had just experienced a pretty big failure in the sense that they designed a particular, I don't even know the terms for it, but a cart thingy, and it didn't work. Okay? It was week 14. It's pretty late, right? It feels like it's a massive. But you wouldn't, it's hard to capture these moments, but these kinds of analyses can help us with that. So that's stage 1. We're by no means finished with that. We're continuing to use better tools to improve our topic extraction. But we've also, in our early stages of continuing with phase 2, which is applying the function behavior structure, or FBS ontology. So this is a really well-known ontology that is developed by Dr. Gerald. And so an ontology is basically an abstraction. So just like any design can be described uniformly, the point of this ontology is that designing can also be described uniformly. So you can abstract any design activity using a particular ontology made up of design issues. And what are design issues? Design issues are cognitive actions. And what are the cognitive actions? Well, the main ones, FBS, are the function, which are the purposes of the design, which are drawn from requirements, clients, designer's knowledge. Then you have the behavior, so what the design does or how it does it. And then you have the structure, which is what the design is. And so when you describe the design process, it's basically a series of transitions between the various design issues between F and B and S. And so then, hopefully, what we expect to do, and after we get our training, which will be later this term, is learn how to then code all of our transcript or design review conversations that we have by using this ontology. And then we can abstract our understanding of what happened in these experiences in a much more systematic way. That's our hope. And I'm happy to talk with anyone about this later on as well. I think that includes this part of the talk. The students provided very positive feedback, yes, for their learning. I was told to just show this picture. We're very happy. Oh, that's not one. Oh, then yes.
So after we did that particular pilot, I approached Christina Hassan, and we had another 3 students. This is more of an interdisciplinary team across campus because we have Brianna, who's an engineering student, Lauren, who's from public health, and Brian's from the environment and business program. And we did the exact same program with them. We collected the same kind of data. We collected a little bit more formalized learning reflections. There was a learning tool that was based on Schoen's theory. And we're repeating that pilot again with a set of students that are currently in Uganda right now. So what we're studying is a studio pedagogy during the co-op terms. That's what we're trying to do. So thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Oscar, Anna, and Thomas. If I can get the first group to come up, we'll open the floor for some questions. My friend Hank will run around to the microphone for anyone who has any questions. We have about 15 minutes before everybody rejoins us for closing remarks.
So my question is for the School of Accounting and Finance group. So I'm an alumni from the same program, and I'm super impressed with what you guys presented. My question for you is, how many students are accepted into this venture fund group?
Yeah, so it actually depends based on need per term, but it's usually around 13 to 15 students that we've seen consistently. So this year, for example, we have 13 students. Next term, when we're looking at it, because we will have more embed students in place, we may expand a little more towards the 15 mark. We try to keep it capped just because then everyone gets to do stuff. I think that was the biggest element is we found at times when we weren't being utilized, it's not as effective in terms of the learning experience for sure. So we try to keep it nice and close-knit on that front. So around 13 to 15 students is what we've seen historically.
And part 2 of that question is that because your cohort is so much bigger than 13 people, if you were to give advice to your fellow classmates on how they could get a similar experience or build similar skills in their own way, what would you suggest, or do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I think we can each kind of give one piece of advice, I guess. For me personally, I think it's just being involved in the entrepreneurial community and just seeing what's happening in this environment. So for me, I used to go to velocity pitch competitions that happen on a term-by-term basis. I've been involved with other organizations that are also entrepreneurial in nature, and I think those skills are very transferable. So if you're able to go out and connect with entrepreneurs, go to these talks because they're free for us, and we're able to go out and meet people who are investors, who are making their own businesses. Velocity runs tons of events on campus. So for me, it would be Velocity and connecting with them. It gives you a leg up as well when you're applying to the fund because you can speak about your experiences.
My piece of advice is that you don't need a check to write a thesis. So one of the things that I did when I was applying to funds is they always show the portfolio of their investments. And then one of the common questions is, what's one investment in our portfolio that you like? What is one that you dislike? So being able to see both sides of a recommendation to invest or not to invest on your own, based on existing information, doing your own research, is one great way to get the same experience as well.
So one of my biggest advice is to show your interest in technology, because inherently a lot of the companies we look at are tech companies, and one way to do that, has anyone ever heard of Hack the North? Okay, awesome. So I was actually the director of finance this year, And being an accounting and finance student, and I think I was 2 of 36 people in our, or 39 people in our planning team that was non-engineering, non-math, like non-STEM in general. And I learned a great deal just walking around the event and learning more about technology, learning and talking about people from outside my program. And we invite over 1,000 students every year to come to that. And of course, because of that, definitely encourage students to go to not even just Hack North, but other hackathons that are held throughout the world.
Wonderful presentations and really great examples of what the programs have been doing and the students' capabilities. It's just really lovely. Thank you for sharing that. I have a specific question for Oscar around the application of Schoen's theory. Because I didn't see, and maybe you can talk a little bit about it. How did you bring in Schoen's theory of reflective practice both in, on, and for experience within this context? Maybe talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, certainly. We only implemented reflection on action at the end of each week. So not reflection in action. I mean, we can think about that. There's technology to be able to do that, to wire them up as they're literally minute by minute interacting with their problem. But no, we focused on reflection on action. We developed a very short assessment tool, 2 pages, that the students would fill out after they discussed the engagement with their problem. The tool consisted of a verbal description of the problem they're engaging with, a visual sketch of the problem that they were engaging with, and then 6 questions, 4 which dealt with reflection on action. So the specific questions were, what about the problem that unfolded did you expect, and what is the value of this for a future task? What about the problem unfolded that was unexpected or surprising, and what's the value of this for a future task? And then the other 2 questions were actually not related to Schoen's theory, they're related to causation. So getting the students to intentionally reflect on obstacles that they found and what resources they used to overcome those obstacles. So we have these reflections, this set of reflections for these 3 sets of students that we would like to analyze. And I think it's very rich data, and it's very revealing. One of the things that Ada and I had noticed in these pilots is the impact that culture has on the whole program. And that was intentional, right? The third I in capstone was international. But we underestimated the impact of that. I think the students did too. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I had a quick question for Oscar. I think I might have missed this, but was it intentional to have students placed in Colombia, like selecting a culture that's probably quite different from their own?
Yes, yeah. And initially it was India, but then for logistics reasons it ended up being Colombia, just because Jim was selling this program internally to that too, right? So.
And so how did that add to the value of your experience?
It added a lot, honestly. Being thrown into a manufacturing facility that faces different issues than we face here in North America. They don't have winter, so they're operating in summer season all year long. That was completely new to us. The fact that in Colombia, about 3% of the population speaks English, and they have a population that's greater than the size of Canada. So we have very few people that spoke the same language as us. Luckily for Jordan and I, he is a native Spanish speaker, so we were able to survive. And then there's a whole, the culture of Colombia is completely different. We had an hour and 45-minute lunch every day. And you spend lunch, have a siesta, enjoy, relax. So that was counterintuitive for us. Where we usually scarf down lunch and keep moving. So it was really being thrown into a world that was completely different I mean, even on the way home, we all had to learn how to drive stick shift in the mountains. So we were constantly learning 24 hours a day. So that really impacted us on a daily basis.
Any other questions? All right, well, please join me in thanking all of our presenters.